Hello YouTubers, this week I would like to present to you acrylic pour painting. Now this technique has been around on YouTube for a while, but just recently it seems to be just exploding into all sorts of various different techniques and styles and ideas. So I thought I'd try and demystify the process and make it easy and affordable for everyone, and really cover some of the basics about what it is and how it works and that kind of thing. So listen, I've got all the bits ready. Let's start. So if you're not sure what acrylic pour painting is, I've got a couple of examples here to share with you. Basically, you are creating a liquid pourable paint using acrylic paints and a mixing medium, and then dribbling it over a canvas and allowing either gravity or your use of various techniques to create patterns or cells or various other different types of texture within that surface and then letting that dry. So you can be as abstract or as controlled as you like. In this example, I actually used a few techniques, and I think I created quite a fantastic looking galaxy background, or something that I could really frame quite well. In this next one, I used very similar colour tones and colour palette. So it's a lot more subtle than the previous example, but again, something to be proud of and something that I really like. Just got a few bits of flecked paint on there that I can brush off. And in this one, I was using iridescent paints together with dark paints, and I was dragging things through it like a comb so that you get lots and lots of lines through it and various different patterns, whichever way up you look at it. Okay, I'll just pop these to one side, and next up I'll show you what you'll need. So the first thing you're going to need is some paint. Now, I've read a lot on the internet about how you only must use soft body, you can't use heavy body. This is total rubbish. You can use any acrylic paint, whether it's heavy body, soft body, from the tubes, from the bottles. There's just a slight tweak to the recipe that I'm going to show you in this to enable to use any of these. I've even got things with iridescent or mica inclusions in here. I've got golds and silvers, opaque colours. That is one thing that you'll need to look out for, and that is that generally the colours need to be opaque, so not translucent. It should tell you somewhere on the tube or the bottle whether it is. This one says it here. I think these ones say it on the back, but generally opaque is better because they're going to hold their colour when they come into competition with other colours, whereas the transparents may give you a colour shift or a colour overlay and muddy things up. Do you know what? Try it out. If you like the transparent look, go for it. If you're going to use maybe a red iridescent with a red translucent, that could work well. So there's no hard and fast rules. I'll just explain the difference very quickly though between the two different types of paint. On this one I've got soft body paint, and if I tilt that up towards you, you can see that although I blobbed it out, it's actually dried in a very smooth dome shape. So it's self-leveled almost, whereas a heavy body will keep its shape as it comes out of the tube or the bottle. So you can see on this one there are some peaks on the colours. That's as it came out of the tube. So it almost looks like toothpaste when it comes out, and it holds that shape. That's really the difference. So for example, if we're trying to make a runnier version of acrylic paint, we'd need to add less mixer to the soft body than we do to the heavy body. I'll explain more when I show you how to mix your paints. So that's paints. I'll just shift them to one side. Next thing you're going to need is some PVA glue. Now I've got this one from Hobbycraft, but any white craft or school glue is fine. It's just runny white stuff. Dries clear is obviously better than dries white because you don't want the white to be adding to the colour of the paint. Essentially what this is going to do though is bulk out the colour of the acrylic paint. So that's ingredient number 2. I'll come on to another ingredient soon. However, you'll also need maybe some cocktail shot glasses, Old yogurt pots are just as fine. Basically, this is what we need to measure out our paints, our glue and our water that we'll be adding to the recipe. So rather than measuring or weighing, as I've seen some people do, or marking off this, that and the other, I've just literally used this as one measure. So when I come to my recipe and I show you the different combinations, you can say, well, half of one of these or one of these is one measure. So it just makes it much more easier and it involves less maths. You'll then need some larger plastic containers to mix your paints in, or to mix your pouring colours in, and obviously some stirring sticks. All of these are dirt cheap, and the cocktail glasses as well. They all came from, up here it was the Poundland, but I'm sure there's a Pound Shop or a Pound World near you. You've probably even got things like this already in your home. And again, just old cleaned out yogurt pots or little dessert pots are just as fine. These are just for mixing. It's no big deal. I have got a couple of plastic cones here just to help me make patterns in the things, but these are not essential for the actual paint pouring. They're just for decorative techniques. And then obviously you'll need a surface to pour onto. Now you can use the stretched canvases, but do be aware, obviously, when these get very wet, the center area starts to sag. So you may get a different pattern around the edge unless you prep them thoroughly with gesso first. So that's possibly an added expense. A cheaper and much very effective alternative is the canvas boards. Oops, that was my breakfast list. These are basically canvas that have been glued onto a piece of cardboard, thick cardboard, and they work just great for this technique, and they're sometimes much easier to handle than the stretched canvas frames. These have a tooth though, so when the paint is flowing, sometimes it can catch on this and not flow as thoroughly as we'd like it to. Two ways to get around this. One is to coat it with something first, say for example a couple of coats of gesso. That'll just fill in the crevices and help make it a little bit smoother. Or indeed we could actually just roughly or lightly sand down the top a bit. Doesn't have to be too complicated or too thorough. You can just get it to where you want it to be. But to be honest, straight out of the wrapper, these are perfect. One other thing I found was watercolour board. Now I've not tried this, but it does feel a little like it's going to absorb a lot of moisture, so it might bend as we go. Now, one final ingredient, and this is the thing that is going to help us create cells, and that is WD-40. This can cost me £1 from the Pound World. So it's not an expensive ingredient, but it's going to help us create that effect that everybody's raving about. And that's this, with all the different little cells and pockets of colour and striations of different things. If I show you the alternative is really just the paint pouring over itself and moving and mixing as you tilt and move the canvas. Whereas by adding the WD-40, we get these extra cells included. Right, so that's all we need. No going to find this fluorotol, whatever that is, and wherever you find it. No trying to find silicone, no trying to find special ingredients. Everything that you need, you should be able to find in a local discount store for less than £10 total. So don't think this has to break the bank either. Right, I think it's about time I showed you the recipe and we got pouring. Right, time for the magic recipe. So I've got 3 cocktail shot glasses here, water, glue and paint. What we're going to need to do is measure equal parts of each of these and then mix them in our beaker. So for example, if I've got a full shot glass of water, I'll need a full shot glass of glue and a full shot glass of paint. If I want to mix less, then I just reduce the amount in the first cocktail shot glass and match the other 2 with that. So it's a 1:1:1 ratio. If you're using a heavy bodied paint, such as high viscosity paint or anything else that's going to dry with that peak because it's got that stability to it, then you may wish to add just a little bit more glue and a little bit more water. The exact combination you will have to figure out because each manufacturer's consistency is different and obviously you want it to be, fairly runny. So I'll show you the consistency once I've mixed it as well, but I'll just start the mixing process, and I will speed this up a little bit because I've got a little bit of stirring to do as well. So in with the paint I go. And as mentioned, I am going to reduce, so instead of adding more water and glue, I'm actually just going to reduce the amount of paint that I put in, because this is, as you can see, a heavy bodied paint. So there's about 2/3 of a shot glass of paint here. That is an entire tube, by the way. So probably a good idea to look for budget paints if you're going to be mixing a lot. The glue we are going to put in, and we're going to do a full shot glass of this. Now, there's many people out there that have discussed the, why don't we just mix it with more water? If you add more water, what you will end up with is just a very runny, weak solution, and it will break down the binders in the paint, and that's not what we want. So what the glue is doing is padding out the binder in the colour, and then the water is just thinning that down to a runny consistency or a creamy consistency. Think of single or double cream. We want that kind of runny, creamy feel to it. So water is going to go in the mixing beaker first. Then I'm going to scrape in all of the glue just with my stick. Now you can reuse the glue one, because that will only ever be that one. You can always label it up with a Sharpie marker, or if you're mixing lots of colours you can always just pre-dose this out, or you can indeed wash these out. Okay, so that's my glue. I'm trying to make sure that I've got as much from that glass as possible. I'll just put those to one side. And then the final element is that the paint goes in. Now sometimes I have mixed this first and then the paint in, or sometimes I've just dumped them all in and mixed them. To be honest, I've found absolutely no difference in the quality of the pouring paint that I get with either method. So it's entirely up to you. You can mix and then dose, or you can mix and just keep mixing. Okay, so that's as much as I can get out of there. So now it is just a case of stirring, as opposed to whipping. We're stirring this backwards and forwards all around until we get the consistency and the mix that we're after. So we don't want to see any streaks of glue, and we don't want to see blobs of paint or puddles of water. We just want excuse me for getting my words out, we just want a smooth, creamy, pourable paint. Trying to avoid getting loads and loads of air bubbles as well, because this may cause us some issues with the pour, or it will create interesting results with the pour depending on your viewpoint. Okay, let me see how this is going. So we're looking okay so far. So you can see how that is sticking to the stirrer but also running off it in a smooth, creamy fashion. I think it just needs a little bit more mixing. Okay, I think that one's done. Right, what I've got to do now is mix up a few more colours, because I'm going to try and do a rainbow pour with lots of different colours this time. I won't put you through the mixing process for each of those, but it is exactly the same. 1 part water, 1 part paint, 1 part glue, or in the case of heavy body paints, either slightly less paint or more water and glue. Okay, so I will see you back here in a second with all of those ready mixed. Time now to do some pouring. So what I've got is I've got my 5 colours mixed and ready to go. I've got a red, an orange, a blue, a green and a violet or a purple. So I'm hoping in some way, shape or form that there will be some kind of rainbowy outcome. What I've also got here is just a plastic tray. This excuse me, This is going to catch the dribbles as I pour the paint onto the canvas. This doesn't have to be anything super expensive. This was £1 from the pound shop. You could use a baking foil tray, or you could just literally cover your desk with a bin liner. It's just to protect our work surface. Me, because I'm going to have to take this somewhere else to clean it, I've chosen to use a tray that I could just lift up and move over. So that was just that point. I've also got myself a tall clear beaker. I'm using a clear beaker because I want you to see what I'm doing when I'm pouring these paints into here. But what I'm going to do today is what they call a dirty pour. That means you're going to put all of your colours into one pot and then pour onto your canvas. There are other styles of pouring where you can go one colour at once, pour that way, or there are other ways where you can pour them, 2 or 3 at once onto the canvas, depending on how you're doing it or what you're using. Today, though, as I say, I'm doing a dirty pour. Right, so I'm going to go with my darkest colour first and then work my way up the colour range. You could start at this end and go the other way. The choice is yours. You will get different effects depending on what you're doing. So what I'm going to do is just pour some of this down the side of the glass into the beaker. Because I'm using a small canvas, I don't want to waste any paint, and I can always put cling film over the top of these, or pour them into another container with a lid and keep them for another day. Now, the green I'm pouring on top of the purple, and I'm doing it down the side of the glass so that I don't have them all splodging and spreading in the bottom of the glass. They're almost sitting on top of each other. Then we're in with some blue. Next up, a bright orange. Whether it will stay this bright is another question. And then some red. Ooh, blub, blub, blub. Okay, I think I've got enough in there. Now I'm going to set that to one side for the moment, and I'm going to put 4 of my cocktail shot glasses on the tray so that I can position my canvas on top so that things will dribble off the sides if it starts to dribble straight away. You don't have to do this, this is just something I do. You could put it straight onto the tray if you wanted. One thing to try and do is make sure it's as level as possible. Don't go to the length of getting a spirit level and doing all that sort of nonsense. Just make sure that it's not all going to go off one side straight away. You want some playing time. And we're going to lift this up and tilt it around anyway. So the fact that it's not level right now is not an issue. When it comes to drying, you're best off trying to find somewhere level and flat to put it on. That could be anywhere. A kitchen counter, a dining table with, obviously something to protect the work surface, or even just take this tray and put it somewhere flat. Anyway, listen, I'm sure you're shouting at your screen saying, come on, blooders, pour. So I am going to do that. Now, I could just basically pour it all in the centre and let it flood out. However, what I'm going to do for this is I'm actually going to start in one corner, and then I'm going to zigzag my way down the canvas. And you can see already that there is a pattern forming just by pouring these paints in this way. I'm slowing down when I get to the end because obviously there's less paint running out, so I just want to make sure I get good coverage. And then I'm just going to try and make sure that I get towards the edges on all sides. Now that in itself will be a nice pattern when it all comes together, or all has dribbled off or fallen off, sorry. But remember that little magic ingredient, the WD-40? Well, what I'm going to do is just do a very quick spritz across the top of there, and we'll see what happens. See? All those cells formed straight away, and they're going to continue growing as the paint spreads and floods out. Be careful not to get this stuff all over the place though, and do obviously open a window. Now, I can see everything forming and things, but I just want to have a little play. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift it up and tilt it so that more of this paint runs off, more of the surface tension gets those colours stretching. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, oh my word, look at all that paint you're wasting underneath, you know what? You could always pick it up afterwards, or even doing this dribbling process, dribble it into something else and then reuse it. Just bear in mind it will already have the WD-40 in and won't need remixing or anything with anything else. Okay, this is looking good so far. Might just tilt it off to one side for a bit. I can see so much happening with these cells. There's lots of different colours coming through. What that WD-40 is doing, by the way, is it's breaking the surface tension of the top layers of paint to allow the bottom layers to come through. And each time it comes in contact with a lower layer, it breaks that. So it's almost bringing those colours up. Okay, I am going to leave that as it is. Obviously, I'm going to wash my hands. Wearing rubber gloves is sometimes a good idea for this, but if you don't mind getting messy, then hey, go for it. Sometimes I do this in the kitchen, so it's easy to get to the tap. Where you do it in your house is your business. Right, I'm going to leave that alone. Now this does need around 24 to 48 hours to fully dry. It will depend on the liquidity of the paint, the general ambient room temperature and various other factors. So I will obviously come back to this later in the video, but obviously I won't wait 24 hours in the video to show you. I will show you in just a flash. So here is the finished small canvas that I did, and I'll give you some close-ups of this in just a minute, but there are many cells, many colours, and I think it's an absolutely fab piece of art. What I did after I left you though is I used the remaining paint to have a go at a larger canvas. Same canvas board, but what you've got here are lots and lots of bigger cells with this sort of fiery updraft. And then the cool skies have got flecks of green and blue and orange and all sorts, and it's just an unbelievably beautiful thing to look at close up. Again, I will give you some close-ups in a minute. I don't know whether you can pick it out, but what you will notice is that it's starting to dry. So it is curving the board a little bit, and this is natural. You can just gently bend the board out afterwards, just retaining it to its basic shape. What's essentially happening is the paint and the glue is forming a skin, and as it dries, it contracts, so it's just pulling up the edges. The colours will dull a little bit, especially if you are using matte paints. One way you can change this is by adding a gloss coat afterwards. Various different options there depending on your budget, or you can put a light spray over it. Do you know what? The finishing touches are entirely up to you. What I just love though is the totally organic feel that you get from these pieces of art, and I for one I think have found a brand new hobby that I'm going to keep going with. I don't know about you. Listen, anyway, I hope the recipe has helped. If you have any questions about this video that I've made, please do leave them in the comments section on YouTube or on the blog, gentlemancrafter.com. And that just about wraps up the technique. So there we have it, paint pouring made easy. I hope you'll give it a go, and I look forward to seeing what you make. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next episode of Gentleman Crafter TV.